Thank you for that question. I think it's widely lauded now that the majority of developing countries have essentially not been happy with this particular goal. If we go back to the previous goal of the $100 billion that was agreed, even that struggled, and I think there was almost a 2-year gap in terms of when it was supposed to be implemented and when it was actually implemented. Given the fact that developing nations are the most hit, by climate change and the adverse effects of climate change, the onus really is on the developed nations who essentially have been the major emitters to be able to support developing countries. Developing countries have inadequate infrastructure and also lack the fiscal buffers to be able to absorb, climate change-related incidents. We're talking about, crippling economies and struggling GDPs. So it's vitally important that we see that support from the global north to the global south. It's simply not enough, and even the goals that were agreed does not necessarily state exactly how this funding is going to be coming in. We do not want to be further indebted. So it's vital that funding that is coming for climate change adaptation needs to be equitable to developing countries.
All right. Most countries, especially developing countries, do not seem to be too satisfied with the new document. Talking about increasing the finance. Why are you not seeing like the issue of reducing the emissions first before now talking about funding?
Well, look, the reality is that developing countries, well, if I take Africa for instance, probably contributes less than 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're contributing that minute amount, really our focus is not necessarily on emissions reduction. Our focus is on adaptation. We are the hardest hit when it comes to climate change. So our focus really is to make sure that our countries are not decimated, our economies are protected from the impacts of climate change. When you also consider that the lack of fiscal buffers, the poor infrastructure, really does not bode well for us in terms of being able to adequately adapt. So if we are talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, I don't think that is the focus for Africa and developing nations. It is really the onus on the developed economies to be able to reduce those greenhouse gases. And also, we are looking at, from a development perspective, Africa also needs to develop, and development is going to require energy. So if we're looking to develop, really we have the opportunity to develop in a green manner, and that will also require funding. So when we are talking about emissions reductions, we also position it against African development agenda. We need to develop, but we need to develop in a green manner, and we do need funding for that, so that in the long run we are not adding to the current emissions that is happening globally.
All right, developing in a green manner, you just said. One of the fallouts of COP29 is supposed to address the need to reduce carbon emission and keep fossil fuels in check. Has this been met?
Well, I think some of the wins we could take from this COP are two things: the operationalization of the loss and damage fund, and also the Article 6 framework for carbon markets. Those are probably two wins that we could say will certainly be beneficial to African countries and developed nations. On the loss and damage, that provides funding for the hardest hit nations for climate and to meet the needs of those developing countries. The carbon market actually provides a fantastic opportunity for developing nations to be able to generate carbon credits and to be able to initiate carbon projects that will also yield funding for these nations. I think developed nations, especially in Africa, have fantastic opportunities to be able to generate those carbon credits. And with the Article 6 framework, there are opportunities whereby countries are able to have bilateral agreements to be able to offset the emissions from higher emitting nations. But with that also comes a cost. So we have that opportunity to be able to state, that price. That carbon is valuable, and we need to create those frameworks and set those policies, institutional frameworks in place to be able to price our carbon, at a more equitable price.
Just before I let you go, what is the next step for Nigeria going forward?
Fantastic. I think we need to start looking, really seriously into this particular sector. Climate change is global. We need to, create our institutional frameworks. We have signed up to the Paris Agreement. There is also the NDC, that's the Nationally Determined Contributions 3.0, that will be submitted in 2025. Now, this provides us an opportunity to be able to, really create actionable, bankable project plans that will help us in meeting our nationally determined contributions and also attract much needed climate financing. I think what we've had in the past have not necessarily been, really, focused. We've had frameworks without really having those, real bankable projects that will lead us to meeting our climate goals. And I think this is the opportunity for us to really do that.
All right.